Today, I'm very glad to have Ayaz Basrai, co-founder at the Busride Design Studio, to be a part of the Those Who Design series. The studio's philosophies and solutions, as they say, range from the slightly mad to the totally insane. I have known Ayaz as an intellectual who has challenged and changed the ordinaries of interior design as a profession in various ways to create extraordinary thought leadership in the sphere of design thinking. I hope our conversation today questions the stereotype, and I thank and welcome him with his critical glasses on to discuss his opinions and beliefs with us. So I'm going to start, Ayaz, asking you a little bit about this idea of design thinking, and a lot of industries now are deploying this for problem solving, from financial services to healthcare and stuff like that. And I was at least keen to understand from the designers themselves how they are using, within the fields of, let's say, architecture, interior design, and this conversation is specific to interior design, how they are using design or their design thinking to go beyond form and function.
I mean, I come from a fairly grounded 60s modernist education. So, studying industrial design at NID. And this was, so it's essentially the legacy of Bauhaus and Ulm and these kind of European design schools, which were fairly grounded in the modernist tradition. So form follows function, essentially is what one was taught throughout. But I think that's the one thing that we've come to question quite seriously in the kind of recent work that we've been trying to do, because when you spot the roots of where this thinking comes from, it's a very ancient root. It comes from, ancient kind of almost Greek kind of thought patterns. And, there's this underlying metaphor of the tree, which kind of underlies all of these thought patterns, right? So there's a certain flow charting. So something follows something, there is a certain central premise, and then there are hypotheses, and then it kind of grows in a flow chart. And this is the way we hold metaphors in our own head, things like family tree. These are all very grounded tree metaphors that we hold in our head. What we're trying to really currently question is the validity of that metaphor, because some of the work that we're trying to do right now is a lot more collaborative in nature. It's a lot more flatter in terms of hierarchy. That sort of tree-like metaphor actually creates hierarchies. So that's why we manifest institutions in that pattern. But our thinking more is like now in terms of rhizomatic thinking, which is, sort of individual nodes that are connected by intelligent connections. So it's a bit more like the way a bamboo grove would grow, for example, as against a tree would grow. If one had to say, summarize the form follows function, 60s design thinking sort of paradigm, it actually looks at making things happen. But the work that we're trying to do is trying to allow things to emerge. So it's a bit of a shift in terms of or what we're really trying to do with the process itself.
And I want you to dwell a little bit about specifically your work in interior design, with maybe some examples or just ways of thinking around how you are challenging this linear way of thinking, which normally one just comes at it, right? You got a client, you got a brief, this is what you need to do, and you kind of go and do it to the best of your capability. Talk to me a little bit about ID in that way. And how that's shaping up for you, using that for the for this transformative impact, for stuff to happen, like you're saying.
Absolutely. So I think we've been fortunate to do a lot of work in hospitality, right? And hospitality has been one of those fast churners of culture. So when a restaurant actually tries something, you can actually have a social experiment that is running with 300 to 400 people per day. And you get a chance to see how that's playing out on a day-to-day basis, which is the kind of sample set that you don't have working with, smaller groups of people, as against an office or even say like a residence where your sample set is really 4 to 5 people. So at a restaurant scale, one can actually try out a whole bunch of really, really interesting experiments. And one thing that does come to mind is something we've done quite a while ago called Smokehouse Deli. And this was really a response to the single provocation that you need to throw serious money to have a serious restaurant. The Smokehouse Deli actually came up at a time and in a place in Delhi in this really kind of fancy mall, which had 4 crore, 5 crore fit outs all around. And when we walked there, we kind of sensed that, okay, it's beautiful, they're opulent, they're detailed, they're really, really kind of soulful spaces. But you realize that when someone is spending 5 crores on a restaurant, and this is again almost 15 years ago, so there's no business plan in place, right? Like it's essentially someone's ego who's written that check. So what we started questioning was the validity of the business in the first place. That this restaurant is never going to break even; it's never going to make money. Why would you set off on a venture like this in the first place, right? So we thought, let's create that whole experience of detail and soul and storytelling, but using 250 rupees as our budget. Essentially, it became 25 markers, 10 rupees a piece, and drawing for 35 days. You can kind of drawing the whole restaurant. I think it substitutes labor for spend. It substitutes very, very hands-on engagement with the surface of the restaurant, where you can tell multiple stories. And that opened up a whole world of possibilities for us. Sort of holding briefs loosely in your head, not letting them crystallize too soon. I think that really helps. And we have a very deep respect for ambiguity. I think we try to create as much ambiguity in our process as possible so that the crystallization happens right in the end.
I want to come to the next question in that. And, I'm looking at this simpler network of client, architect, maybe a craftsman or builder, whatever, and the user, right? And if I were to string that along as a kind of a stakeholder set, I wanted to get your thoughts and focus a little bit on a project. And I think we're going to talk about a very interesting project, Folly House. So I want you to talk us through how this set of stakeholders, how did you think about the brief? Where is it that you challenged? How did culture happen? And what was the starting point? And then we will go on to for you to walk us through what were the big moves that you made on the project. I've obviously seen some of the pictures; they're fantastic. Seen some of the drawings, so we'll talk more on that. But first, about that stakeholder set, if you may.
Got it. So I think Anubhav, one of the things that has been really, really helpful for us is to really, really get into bed with clients. In the sense that they become people we know really, really well. And in that sense, one is trying to create, experience in the home which is very, very autobiographical, right? Like because a lot of people build homes once, or a lot of people maybe once or twice, and these are fairly cathartic processes. It's a bit like going for therapy or whatever. I mean, you're asked uncomfortable questions, about gender, and we try to be on the therapist's couch. You're trying to have very, very long conversations which actually engage with the nitty-gritties, with the nuances of living. So, for example, with the Folly House, what was really, really lovely was to have these long, elaborate, endless conversations with both Deepa and Nishit. And they're a young family. They have 2 young kids, both very, very hands-on parents. They share all responsibilities. So what was really lovely is to see the collapse of gender roles in the house itself in terms of the way they conducted themselves. And one is able to pick up all these things with just having a very, very long, protracted kind of interaction. And we used to create as many opportunities for these kind of interactions. So one of the things that we've internally been very critical of is aesthetic-driven design decisions, because I feel those are the ones that die quick deaths. Because then essentially what you're saying is that these are my blinkers for this project, or these are my stereotypes, or these are the things that I'm going to now pander to. And the scary part about these aesthetics is now they're shared. They are shared democratically, which is great. I think if as a design practice, if the only thing that we're able to contribute to is aesthetic, then we're going to die a very, very quick and violent death. We'll be phased out by the next big advance in AI. In the next 5 to 6 years, I think, not even too far away.
Normally, when we use moving parts, it's been traditionally deployed in spaces which are small. Here, you've got a large gallery and you've got these moving parts, which was an interesting take, but one which first I questioned to say, okay, well, these are still objects, right? At the end of the day, like you're saying, whether it's the console with, the study tables and stuff that folds up, whether it's the pivoted dining table and so on. And I wondered how practical it would be from a home perspective. One, from a rooted standpoint, that somebody who comes to a home, and this is not to say it must be static, but two, from a timeless standpoint. I mean, maybe this couple is 35, 40 years old right now, and let's say they hope to live in this home for several years. So let's say they're 65 or 70, right? So one question was around that. The other question was more subjective as a designer, where I felt that there was a gallery-like feeling to this space, right? And almost exhibition design like quality. It's designed around some kind of a parametric seating device. And after I went through the program and appreciated the merits of stuff happening, I almost wondered what happens if I remove that central device and the center of it was empty space rather than an object itself. This shift, which you hoped for it to happen, let's say now that this space is designed, I wonder, when you went back to it, do they like certain configurations the way they are? Do they really change it every day? Does the help do it? From a non-sexy point of view, have the channels just gone bad? In that zone. So I don't want to fuss the door handles, but I want you to reflect on the pragmatism of this on a day-to-day life.
No, that's super interesting. In fact, I think one of the very, very initial conversations were around this, because even on the initial design drawings and the way the sort of fit out was shaping up, there was a little bit of an overlap in terms of because we were taking a very hard stance on a few things, right? In fact, even the way the lighting is, it's all very gallery-like. It feels like you're walking into some sort of a sculpture garden kind of thing, and it's lit that way as well. It's the lighting doesn't soften those relationships. And what was really interesting about this particular project, Anupam, was that we took this hard stance together. I mean, something they said very early on really kind of resonated, because they said they wanted their kids to grow up in a world without rules. This was like a sort of almost a combined experiment which was being run, and it is a very hard stance. I personally am not sure, I would like elements of that in my own home, but I'm not sure if I would be able to, live out my whole life in a home that demands that much from me, right? And in fact, in our post-occupancy interviews with them, what really came out was this thing, that we were designing it for a very fast iteration. Like we were designing it for almost like every object moves every day. But what's really interesting is what they told us is that they've settled into a certain rhythm, with the movement of the objects. So, for example, they prefer their living room Folly to be open most of the time. It's only shut, for example, when they're entertaining. When they want a large kind of, and they have regular friends over, they have, so they don't want to expose their books, for example, to everyone. So, everything kind of shuts down. And we've done the other side of it, which is the regular maintenance bits, because we also did the contracting for this project. So we were fairly involved in, even the post-occupancy. So there were a few glitches that keep happening for the first 6 months, but post that, it's actually worked really well. It was fairly over-engineered. So these are all sort of finger movement kind of channels. So in that sense, I think the mechanics of it were less of a challenge rather than the oppressiveness of the direction that one has taken.
I'm going to put you in the critic's chair, right? Great experiment. So, like every experiment, some stuff works, some stuff didn't, right? Would you do it over? And if you would, if you could do it again, or if you want to use learnings from this to apply elsewhere, what are the things that you think you would not necessarily fix for, but the lessons learned from doing this experiment as a critique of it now looking back?
I think we paid a lot of attention to the objects. So, essentially it was designed objects first. And I think what happened was we had a certain amount of graphical quality which was reserved for the ceiling and the flooring. So just in terms of The ceiling and the flooring actually code the relationships between the objects. So the ceiling actually looks at how this object talks to the next, or what opens up. So all those kind of codes are drawn in the ceiling and the flooring. But I feel, if we had theorized it a bit more, if we had actually managed to think through, we kind of realized a lot of resonances later. Like we kind of realized the resonance with deconstruction theory, with Derrida's writings. Also this amazing project by Bernard Schumi where he's designed these architectural scale follies in the Parc de la Villette. So, there were these passing references which in the beginning became more inspirational or more kind of styling references, or more just to understand the built grammar of it. But I feel if we had maybe engaged a bit more with the theory of it, with critically reading Derrida before getting into the design process, I think it would have informed a lot of the nuance. If we had to even take out a few learnings from this process, just a response to your question really, I feel like, for me personally, there were a lot of relationship learnings, in the sense that how does one conduct yourself in a position of actually being descriptive and not prescriptive, right? Like you don't enter a relationship saying, I will tell you what to do, and because, you hired me, I know better, that kind of high horse that most kind of design studios tend to fall into. I think our role becomes to describe better or to find a better vocabulary to describe what already exists. Therein is the key to a certain kind of relationship, right? I think we can, even if one looks at it as an experiment, it definitely doesn't have scale. Like it doesn't have the scale attached to it, saying, okay, I can't do 20 apartments like this, or I can't do 50 apartments like this, because that defeats the purpose of the experiment in the first place. But I feel there is a process, there is a way of engaging, there is a certain questionnaire maybe, or a certain, long iteration with design that is scalable.